I want to look up this morning an interesting subject, and I think Paul might have talked about this a while ago. I can't remember for sure in what context, but I remember Paul did say something about this a while back. But I want to talk about, because we're going to have a little party with David afterwards because he's 80. He doesn't know that, but he knows now. It says in Psalm 90 about a 70 or 80 year lifespan, and I just want to talk about, is that a myth? Okay, so is a 70 or 80 lifespan, is it a myth? Okay, so we're going to look at Psalm 90. It's quite interesting. Psalm 90, and we're going to read Psalm 90 from verse 1 right through to the end. Another quote from somebody, I did tell you the other week, you've probably forgotten all about it, but somebody called Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "Old age is 15 years older than I am." I think that's quite a good quote, isn't it? So anyway, Psalm 90, we're going to read. Oh, that's quite easy to read. So we're going to read it all the way through. It says, "Lord, you've been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting you are God. You turn men back to dust, saying, 'Return to dust, O sons of men.' For 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. You sweep men away in a sleep of death. They're like the new grass of the morning. Though in the morning it springs up new, by evening it is dry and withered. We are consumed by your anger and terrified by your indignation. You set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. All our days pass away under your wrath. We finish our years with a moan. The length of our days is 70 years, or 80 if we have the strength. Yet their span is but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. Who knows the power of your anger? For your wrath is as great as the fear that is due you. Teach us to number our days aright, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Relent, O Lord. How long will it be? Have compassion on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you've afflicted us, for as many years as we have seen trouble. May your deeds be shown to your servants, your splendor to their children. May the favour of the Lord our God rest upon us. Establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands." So I just want to talk about age for a minute before we come back to that psalm. According to Public Health England in February 2016, they said the life expectancy at older ages in England has risen to its highest level ever, which is amazing. So according to their statistics, a man who achieves the age of 65 is expected to live another 19 years, which is 84, or women at 65 are expected to live another 21 years, which is 86. The women all seem to live slightly longer according to statistics. You can have your own view about that. Interestingly, 100 years ago, the average expectancy for a man would have been about 64 and a lady about 63, so it's slightly younger then. So you may have read this verse, you may have heard this read talked about, somebody may have quoted this verse at you and said, well, you know, that's your life expectancy, 70, or maybe if you're strong enough, it could be 80 years, and that's your life expectancy. And that's kind of a prevalent view in the world. People are not Christians, or purport to be Christians, who know this verse from somewhere, they've got it from somewhere, talk about 70 years and 10, don't they? You hear that being talked about. So it's obviously permeated our language and our thought life. People often say that if you're over 40, you're over the hill, because they take the view that 40 is half of 80. So if you're over 40, you're over the hill. And that, again, is a very prevalent thought in the world, isn't it? So when you achieve 40, people make a big deal about you being 40 and about what's going to happen next, or they joke it's all going to be downhill, all that kind of stuff, don't they? And this is all out there in the world, isn't it? And we're subjected to this. It may have infiltrated our lives and our families and even our thinking. But it is only about statistics, because 100 years ago, if you'd achieved the age of 70 or 80, or you've been told you're going to achieve 70 or 80, people have thought you're perhaps a bit crazy, because the average lifespan then was 64 and 63, according to statistics. So it's just about statistics. But God can always trump statistics, can't he? His promises can always trump statistics. So this is where we're going with this morning. So this psalm, Psalm 90, we have to look at who wrote it. And it's really interesting. This psalm was written by Moses. Moses didn't write many psalms, and this is possibly one of the oldest psalms in the Bible. Now Moses, just a bit of game here. How old was Moses when he died? Can somebody tell me? I'll take a year or two either way. 120, exactly. Well done, Paul. 120. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 7. It says, this is about Moses. It's coming up, swifter than a... Here we go. Moses was 100 years old when he died. Yeah, get that, David, another 40 years. Yep. And his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. We're going to come back to that in a minute, because that's quite an interesting thought as well. So it says in this psalm, if anyone can achieve 80 years, he's done well, it's his strength that's achieved it. Yet, we find this is the age that Moses was at 80 when he first met Pharaoh. And just look at a few Bible verses just to connect that thought together. So we're going to look at Acts chapter 7, verse 23. Here it comes. When Moses was 40 years old, he decided to visit his fellow Israelites. And then we go on to verses 29 through to 34. When Moses heard this, he fled to Midian, and he settled as a foreigner and had 2 sons. After 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to Moses in the flames in a burning bush in the desert near Mount Sinai. When he saw this, he was amazed at the sight, and he went over to look more closely. He heard the Lord's voice, I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses trembled with fear and did not dare to look. Then the Lord said to him, take off your sandals, the place where you're standing is holy ground. I have indeed seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I've heard their groaning, and I've come down to set them free. Now come, I will send you back to Egypt. And we just flip on to verse 36, which says, he led them out of Egypt and did wondrous and miraculous signs at the Red Sea and for 40 years in the desert. Then we go back to Deuteronomy 2, verse 7. The Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hands. He's watched over your journey through this vast desert. These 40 years, the Lord your God has been with you, and if not lacked anything. And then just go to Exodus 7, verse 7. Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron was 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. 40 is significant in the life of Moses, really, wasn't it? 40 years when he saw his fellow Israelites being in trouble. 40 years when he went away into the desert on his own to be a shepherd. And then another 40 years when they were in the wilderness together. So 120 was quite an age, wasn't it? And here Aaron was 3 years older than him. So why would Moses say that all men's lives are about 70 or 80 when his own life was 120? And interestingly, his father lived to 137, his grandfather was 133, and his great-grandfather was 137. So why would Moses be saying these kind of things? If we look at Exodus 6, verse 16, just so you think I'm not making these numbers up. There's a lot of people's names here, but you'll just get the idea. These are the names of the sons of Levi according to the records: Gershon, Korath, and Merari. Levi lived 137 years. The sons of Gershon by clans were Libni and Shimei. The sons of Korath were Amram, Ishar, Hebron, Uziel. And Korath lived 133 years. The sons of Merari, Mahali, and Mushi. Great name, Mushi, isn't it? Mushi. Imagine his wife calling him for dinner. Go on, Mushi, dinner's ready. These are the clans of Levi, according to their records. Amram married his father's sister Jochebed, who bore him Aaron and Moses, and Amram lived 137 years. So we have Moses 120. We have, let's get this all right, we have his father 137, his grandfather 133, and his great-grandfather 137. So why would Moses be writing this psalm and saying, well, if you do, you'd expect to live to 70, but if you have enough strength to live to 80? Why would he write that? Think about it for a minute. Why would he write it? Let's just go back to Deuteronomy 34, verse 7, because I like this verse, and Pat was picking up on it just a moment ago. Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. So Moses was fully strong when he died. He didn't sort of whimper and sort of puff away. Caleb was quite interesting as well. Joshua chapter 14, verse 6 through to 11. Now the men of Judah approached Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, said to him, you know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God at Kadesh Barnea, about me and you, so about you and me? I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land. I brought him back a report according to my convictions, but my brothers who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt with fear. Interestingly, he went with his convictions that God could do it, wasn't it? Whereas the other people look with their eyes and not with their convictions. Turn to the next one. I have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly, so on the day Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord has promised, he has kept me alive for 45 years since the time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the desert. So here I am today, 85 years old, and I'm still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out, and I'm just as vigorous to go into battle now as I was then. Another 5 years, David? Pretty amazing, isn't it? Pretty amazing stuff. So, we've looked at the psalm. We looked at the fact that the psalm was written by Moses. Moses was 120. His lineage was in excess of 130. Why would he be writing and saying you can expect to live to 70 or 80 maybe if you're strong enough? Well, we need to look back at Psalm 90 verses 7 to 9. It's the invisible version. We're consumed by anger and terrified by your indignation. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. All our days pass away under your wrath. We finish our years with a moan. Now, if we were to go back into those verses, we can see that Moses is speaking about being consumed by anger. Now, if we look at Numbers chapter 14, verses 33 to 35, this is talking about the Lord talking about the children in the desert. Your children will be shepherds here for 40 years, suffering for your unfaithfulness, until the last of your bodies dies in the desert. For 40 years, one for each of the 40 days you explored the land, you will suffer for your sins and know what it's like to have me against you. I, the Lord, have spoken. I will surely do these things to this whole wicked community which has banded together against me. They will meet their end in the desert. Here they will die. So Moses was speaking about a people being consumed by God's anger. And I think that he is writing about the children of Israel and about their life expectancy in the desert, because they were under God's anger. They were under God's wrath because they disobeyed God. Okay? So he's writing to them in this psalm about what they were suffering. Because probably the youngest to get the 40-year death sentence would have been about 20, and they'd have died about 60 after 40 years. It's possible perhaps the bulk of the population were 30 or 40 years old, so if you add up to 40 years on that, you get to 70 or 80 years that they were allowed to live. So really, this part of this psalm, this lifespan was written to rebels in the desert, was written to the rebels of the Israelites in the desert. So I can't see how it can apply to us today. Okay, are you with me so far? You're all following where it's going? Okay. You see, it does say in those verses in Psalms 90, right? Can you put Psalm 90 verses 7 through to 9 again? I know, just so I can reinforce this. It says, we're consumed by your anger. You set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. All our days pass away under your wrath. All those things do not apply to us under new covenant of grace. And I can tell you that because if you look at Hebrews chapter 8, verses 6 to 12. But the ministry Jesus has received is as superior to theirs as the covenant of which he is a mediator is superior to the old one and is founded on better promises. Though there had been nothing wrong with that first covenant, no place would have been sought for another. But God found fault with the people and said, the time is coming, declares the Lord, when I'll make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. It will not like be the covenant I made with their forefathers when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they did not remain faithful to my covenant, and I turned away from them, declares the Lord. This is the covenant I'll make with the house of Israel. After that time, declares the Lord, I'll put my laws in their minds and write them on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will a man teach his neighbour or a man his brother, saying, know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest. For I will forgive their wickedness and remember their sins no more. So we live under a new covenant of grace where God has forgiven our sins and remembers our wickedness no more. He's no longer wrathful with us because that wrath has been poured out on Jesus on the cross. So when Moses was writing this Psalm 90, he was reflecting back on the people in the desert and the lifespan they could have expected. I don't believe he was writing about us today and saying that's the lifespan that we should be expecting ourselves. So that might be a revelation to you, that might be something you already know. But I think it's an incredible thing that that's how it could be, because that means our thinking can completely change. Our thinking is upon God and his view of our lives. I found reading Psalm 91 a little bit, Psalm 90, a little bit depressing actually. I don't know when we read that at the beginning. Did you find it a little bit heavy going? It was a little bit heavy going, wasn't it? And I think Old Covenant and law is heavy going, and it makes us feel like that. But I love the way that Psalm 91 is put right next to it. And Psalm 91 verses 14 to 16 particularly. It says, because he loves me, says the Lord, I'll rescue him, I'll protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call upon me and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation. Now Moses, for long life, was 120 years at least. His family experience was over 130 years. So I think we should take the view and say 70 or 80, well, more than that. Why not? God is a God of grace, a God of mercy. You know, why not more? Why not believe for more? Why not believe for a longer life? Why not believe for strength and health in our body and our bones? That, you know, we won't fail, we won't go frail, that we'll be strong in our old age. You know, why not? The Bible clearly points to that, doesn't it? Moses 120. I mean, have you met anyone who's 120? I've met a 100-year-old and I was amazed how with it they were, because in your mind's eye you're thinking 100, they're decrepit and had it. You know? So, but it's all to do with our thinking, isn't it? Because the world has put it out there that 70 to 80 is your expectation, that 40 you're over the hill. So we allow the world, if we're not careful, to fuel our thinking and our values in our life, don't we? But Paul writes in Romans, do not be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world. J.B. Phillips translates it in a brilliant way. He says, don't let the world squeeze you into its mould. And you kind of feel sometimes that when you try and stand on God's promises, the world is trying to squeeze you into their way of thinking, their mould, their ideas. And when we're talking about age and health and life, that's one of them, isn't it? You know, they say to you, well, when you get old, you've got to expect a few aches and pains. Why should I? Why should I? You know, who says I should? You know, I'm really stirring you up today because it's in our thinking, is it? We get so absorbed in our thinking. But why? You know, whose word are we standing on? Whose promises are we standing on? Not having it, absolutely. Absolutely. Look at Psalm 92, verses 12 to 15. The righteous will flourish like a palm tree. Who's righteous here this morning? Just put your hand up. You're going to flourish like a palm tree. Hold on to that promise. You'll flourish like a palm tree. Got too many L's in there. A plum tree even. Yeah, even like Brian's plum tree. That was awesome, wasn't it? They will grow like a cedar of Lebanon. That was a tall, strong tree. Dominant, powerful. Planted in the house of the Lord. They will flourish in the courts of our God. They will still bear fruit in old age. I love that. They will still bear fruit in old age. You know, people think when you retire and you slow down, you're going to slow down, don't they? You know, the world is so full of these things. You check it out. People talk about these things, and you just think how much thinking we absorb without thinking about it. You know, we just take it in, and without questioning, saying, is that what God has for me? Is that his best for me? Is that his highest for me? Is that his power at work in my life, or am I settling for something less? It says they will bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green. I love that, the fact we stay fresh and green, evergreen. It's a blinking pain at the moment, the leaves falling off the trees. They look lovely, but they fall off the trees, don't they? I spent yesterday afternoon mowing all the leaves up. I was so pleased I could see all the green grass. I got up this morning. I just could not believe it. The rain and the wind last night, it was I'd never done a thing. It was everywhere. They look lovely colour. They're beautiful. I think it's God showing off, you know, autumn is so beautiful. But the leaves fall off the trees. They die. But our leaves do not fall off our trees. It says there, we'll stay fresh and green. Evergreen. Isn't that wonderful? Tell yourself that. Speak to yourself about that. Proclaim it over your life. It says, proclaiming the Lord is upright. He is my rock, and there is no wickedness in him. Someone once said that old age is a state of mind, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. Okay, it's not in the Bible, but okay, it's worth thinking about what that means. What is in our mind? It says in Proverbs, as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. And our thinking is so key to the way we live our lives, isn't it? If we're thinking upon God's promises and the things he's declared over our lives, what a difference it makes in our lives, doesn't it? It transforms our behaviour. It transforms the way we treat ourselves and other people. It transforms the way we view our lives today. So, when I'm 120, guys, some of you are going to be a bit older than that. And some of you are going to be catching me up. Have a think about it. Ask the Lord, you know?